Welcome to Studying Law Around the World. I'm Claudio Klaus. In each episode, I talk with lawyers, law students, and professors from different parts of the world to talk about legal education, careers, and what the profession looks like in real life. We talk about the hard parts, the surprises, and the decisions that shaped their paths. Whether you're planning to study abroad, thinking about working in another legal system, or just curious about how law works around the world, this podcast is for you. Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Studying Law Around the World. Today, I'm having the privilege of interviewing Ken Kunken. Ken has an incredible story, and I'm so excited that he's here to share with us today. He has a story that is quite unique. He broke his neck playing football for Cornell University in 1970, leaving him almost totally paralyzed from shoulders down. After a lengthy hospitalization, Ken returned to Cornell, where he completed his undergrad degree in engineering. He then earned a Master's of Arts at Cornell in Education, as well as a Master's of Education degree at Columbia University in Psychology. Ken became a nationally certified rehabilitation counselor. He worked for more than 2 years at Disabilities Inc., where he provided vocational and placement counseling for severely disabled individuals. Wanting to accomplish still more, Ken enrolled in Hofstra University's School of Law. Ken then worked for more than 40 years as a Nassau County Assistant District Attorney, where he became a Deputy Bureau's Chief. Thank you so much for making the time to be here, Ken, once again. Ken is married and a father of triplet boys, and also the writer of I Dream of Things That Never Were, the Ken Kunken story, which was published in 2023.
Thank you, Claudio. Thank you for having me as your guest.
Absolutely. I'm very happy you're here today.
Okay, well, I'm currently 75 years old and happily retired. But as you said, in 1970, I unfortunately had a spinal cord injury playing football at the beginning of my junior year in college. And as a result, I'm a quadriplegic. I'm almost totally paralyzed below the shoulders. So I have just a little bit of movement in my left arm and nothing on the right side of my body. But I was fortunate that after a lengthy period of hospitalization and rehabilitation, I was able to return to school, get a number of degrees, and eventually go to law school.
So when you look back at your legal career, maybe what are some of the biggest structural or institutional barriers that you faced, and which ones do you think still exist for lawyers today?
Well, that's an interesting question. I got injured in 1970. That was about 20 years before the Americans with Disabilities Act took effect. So architecturally, very few facilities were accessible to somebody in a wheelchair. When I went back to Cornell soon after my injury, my first day of classes, I had to be either pulled up or bounced down close to 100 steps just to attend my first day. Well, let me jump ahead to going to law school and then working as a lawyer. Through a lot of help from classmates and personal care attendants and family, I was able to complete law school in the standard 3-year time period. I did an internship at the Nassau County District Attorney's Office and really liked it a lot. And when I took the bar exam, they needed to make special arrangements for me because I couldn't write. So they had somebody assigned to do the writing for me, but they only gave me a little extra time before the other individuals started. They didn't give me any extra time on the back end, which meant it takes a few hours just to get me up and ready in the morning and to get to the test. So even if I were to get up at 5 in the morning, I would have difficulty getting there at 8 in the morning to get a little extra time to start the test. Now in America, they give you 2 extra days to take the bar exam. So instead of in 2 days, you can have 4 days. They didn't do that when I took it. I still had to do it in the required 2 days and only had a slightly more time at the beginning than the rest of the test takers. So that was quite a challenge. So let me jump ahead and say that I was able to complete law school in the standard 3-year time period, passed the difficult New York State bar exam the first time that I took it, began my work at the district attorney's office by participating in a very intensive 4-week training program where they taught us all aspects of trial techniques from a prosecutor's perspective. And I very proudly went to court my first day, only to find I couldn't fit through the swinging doorways in the courtroom. They were too narrow to allow me to get through in my electric wheelchair to get to where the lawyers sat and to the prosecutor's table. So that's how I began. After all that schooling, all that training, I had difficulty getting into the courtroom. So you talk about structural barriers and obstacles. I would say that's one of the first that I encountered.
Absolutely. And when you think about, what practicing law looks like today, uh, I'm sure that a lot has gotten better over the years. But do you see some kinds of barriers as well in today's world for lawyers?
Sure, there's still a lot of attitudinal barriers. I mean, people with disabilities, while now they have a better chance of getting employment, still face a lot of discrimination. And it's tough to convince an employer that while you may have a certain physical disability, there's still a lot you could do. And they need to look at your abilities rather than your disability. I might add that when I was first hurt in 1970 and I was undergoing rehabilitation, I was at a well-known rehabilitation institute, and I kept trying to find out more about my disability. And the medical profession seemed reluctant to share much information with me. But I was able to get a hold of a pamphlet that the rehab facility put out, and it described a lot about spinal cord injuries. And I'm injured between the fourth and fifth cervical in the neck. And they had sections broken down by the level of your injury because that determines how much movement you might have. Now, I have, as I said, just a very little movement in my left arm, nothing in my fingers or my wrist, and nothing on the right side of my body. So I remember when I looked up what type of career I could do as what they call a C45 quadriplegic, the only job that I saw for somebody in my condition would be to someday sell magazine subscriptions over the telephone. And I was devastated. I mean, here I had been studying engineering at one of the finest colleges for engineering in the country. And now it seemed like I was looking forward to selling magazine subscriptions over the telephone. And then to make it worse, Claudio, they didn't even have touch-tone phones back then. They only had rotary phones. So I was not even able to dial a telephone, let alone take notes, right? Or make the phone call. So it didn't look very promising. And the computers back then, this was before they really had laptop computers or, they were just starting to develop it. So I really didn't have enough movement to use, one of these tabletop computers. And it was difficult to do anything by computer. And it was really before they started with the voice recognition computers. So trying to do legal research when I was in law school was really, really difficult. And, getting books to do research or, you know, help with trying to prepare, a case when you have difficulty taking notes was incredibly frustrating and difficult. Getting through law school, I mean, there was so much reading to do, and I had difficulty even turning pages of a book to try and read, let alone get books off the library shelf to do legal research. So I faced a lot of challenges most people never had to face.
How did other people's expectations, whether they were low or whether they were very high, shape your career choices and opportunities over time, especially as you joined the legal field?
The expectations for someone in my condition were so low that everybody seemed to have the attitude, you just can't do it. I mean, face it, with your disability, you're not going to be able to do it. And I was convinced, I can still do an awful lot if I'm just given the opportunity. So let me talk a little bit about before I even went to law school. Here, I got a bachelor's degree from Cornell in engineering, became the first quadriplegic to ever graduate from Cornell. But I knew engineering was not a viable field for me. Again, this was well before they had laptop computers. So I pursued a career in counseling. And I went to Cornell, earned a Master of Arts degree in counseling and student personnel administration, became the first quadriplegic to ever earn a graduate degree from Cornell. Then I went to Columbia University and earned a second graduate degree. This one was in psychological counseling and rehabilitation. And at the very beginning of that degree, I met with my advisor who told me, despite what they were teaching in rehabilitation counseling, he wasn't sure I'd ever be able to even get a job. He felt it would be so difficult to get a job in my condition. Even people in the rehabilitation field would be hesitant to hire me. Well, I was determined to move forward. And, when I completed the schooling, here I had 2 degrees from Cornell, 1 degree from Columbia, 3 prestigious Ivy League degrees in America. which is very prestigious, 2 master's degrees, and no one would hire me. I mailed out, and not emailed, they didn't have that then, mailed out physically more than 200 resumes and looked for a job for a year. And everybody seemed to think I was just too disabled to work. Claudio, I was even turned down when I offered to volunteer my services. So that's what it was like back then. And I was fortunate to find one organization willing to give me the opportunity to show what I could do. And that organization was Abilities Incorporated, which is part of what's now called the Viscardi Center, after its founder, Dr. Henry Viscardi Jr. And they hired me to work as a vocational rehabilitation counselor for other individuals with disabilities. And part of my duties would be to speak at conferences and organizations concerning affirmative action and non-discrimination for people with disabilities. And after my talks, I would often be asked questions. And I was always careful to caution the questioners they should really consult with a lawyer about their concerns. And I guess it didn't take long before I started to think, there's no reason why I couldn't become that lawyer. So I left my job and went to Hofstra University School of Law. And I might add that I have an older brother who was practicing criminal law at the time. He was a defense attorney. So I used to go to court and watch him. And I thought this looked like something interesting that perhaps I could do. Now, I might add that when I was finally given the chance to work, that did wonders for my self-esteem, my self-confidence, my feelings of self-worth, because after being told no so many times and that you just can't do it, finally I was now in a position where I could help others. And that made a huge difference for me, absolutely huge. But I had the opportunity to do an internship while I was in law school at the district attorney's office, and I just fell in love with the job. And I thought it looked like something I could do, because to me, it looked like I'd be using my speaking ability as opposed to a lot of research and writing. And I thought it took a lot of guts on the part of the district attorney's office to hire me when they did. Because when they hired me, there had not been a quadriplegic who was an assistant district attorney on Long Island ever. So here, I thought that took a lot of guts on their part. And in fact, they hired me to be a trial attorney. So I was actually going to court and trying cases before juries. You just didn't see that back then. Certainly not on Long Island. And I've been very happy with my career choice of pursuing law.
That's amazing. So you did work for decades as a prosecutor. And I wanted to hear a little bit from you, what did justice look like to you in practice? And also throughout your career, did your perspective on fairness, on this aspect of justice evolved and changed?
Very much so. When I worked as a rehab counselor, I think the advice that I was given is go into some type of advocacy law. See if you can help others with disabilities. But as it turned out, I just grew really attracted to working in criminal law, thanks to watching my brother and doing the internship at the DA's office. But of course, watching my brother, he was a defense attorney. So he worked on the other side of the aisle. So I was used to looking at every case from a defense perspective. And suddenly here I did an internship at the DA's office and really enjoyed not only the work there, but how physically it made more sense for me to be on that side. For one, my office, the district attorney's office, was in the same building as the courthouse. Now that made a huge difference because defense attorneys didn't have their office in the courthouse. Two, we had a lot of secretaries, law student interns, as well as police detectives and police officers to help with the work. It just seemed to make the most sense for me to work on the prosecution side. And that was something I never thought I would do. I mean, there were a lot of television shows about lawyers when I was growing up, but every one, the hero was the defense attorney. You didn't see the hero ever being the prosecutor. So it was quite a change for me to decide to work as a prosecutor. And I was so fortunate to be hired and given that opportunity.
That's fantastic. Well, I feel like many lawyers, to this day feel pressure to fit, a certain image of what success looked like. And I'm curious, did you ever feel that kind of pressure? And how did you, come to define success on your own terms?
I felt a lot of pressure being in the office because I'm dealing with victims of crimes all day long. And many of these victims have been severely traumatized. This has changed their life forever. They didn't feel safe a lot of times. They didn't feel safe going into court and facing the defendant. and being cross-examined about, the worst incident of their life. And dealing with witnesses, took a lot of understanding to know how difficult it was for them, right? And to encourage them to come into court and relive that terrible experience while a defense attorney is cross-examining them and trying to show that either they don't remember correctly or they're mistaken or just not telling the truth. And here I am dealing with witnesses now, trying to reassure them, calm them down because they're all really nervous. And I found my background in psychology and education helped a lot with that. I found my background in engineering helped me approach all my cases with a very logical step-by-step process. So I think my varied background helped a lot in what I ended up deciding to do.
I understand that throughout your career too, you have supervised lawyers, you worked closely with different teams, and what have you learned about, leadership, trust, performance? What are some of the things you observed in these environments where people bring very different lived experience?
Well, it really helped a lot, my background. And eventually, after doing a lot of trials and pretrial hearings and grand jury presentation, I've been promoted a number of times until I eventually became one of the deputy bureau chiefs of our county court trial bureau. And now I was supervising more than 25 other assistant district attorneys. So I think both my education and psychology background helped a lot with dealing not only with witnesses, but dealing with the assistant district attorneys as well. Many of them were new assistants, so they were still learning trial techniques. So there was a lot of teaching involved in what I was doing. But in addition, I think most people don't realize or recognize a lot of lawyers are very nervous before they go to court as well. People think you're used to that. Well, I was dealing with a lot of relatively new assistants, and going into court can be very intimidating. And knowing, your witness is going to be cross-examined, and there are a lot of, not just witnesses, but there are police officers watching you, there are judges and court officers, but also witnesses that are depending on you. And now you're in front of a jury and picking a jury and trying to look confident when there's so many things racing through your mind and trying not to forget anything and knowing that if you screw up, on a very serious case, the defendant could be let go and perhaps threaten or harm, one of your witnesses. And that can be incredibly scary and intimidating when there's a lot riding on this. And your witnesses, your victims, are placing their entire faith into you and the system. And it's a lot of responsibility.
Absolutely. And Ken, thinking about, specifically our audience here, our young lawyers, early career professionals, how they can, navigate all the different pressures that a recent graduate has, whether that is, student loans, or whether that is, having a family, or just, this need to succeed in the profession that they're just starting. And understanding all of this context, I'm curious, if a young lawyer today feels that the system was not built with them in mind, what practical steps would you suggest to help them build a meaningful and sustainable career?
Well, one, they need to work on their listening skills. I mean, sometimes you are so focused on the question you're going to ask next, or what's the next thing you need to do, that you forget to listen to what your witnesses are telling you happened. And when you're trying to ask questions and a witness may give you an answer you aren't expecting, sometimes you got to deviate from what pre-planned script you might have and follow up on the questions and answers that you just received. And as I said before, you've got to recognize a lot of the attorneys you're supervising are under a lot of stress, are feeling very nervous. And a lot of times you've got to just help them to relax and be the best they can be and develop self-confidence in themselves. And another thing that you need to develop your skills is learning the law really well. I mean, when you're a supervisor, people are hitting you with questions from all different sides on all different cases all at once. And when you're a trial attorney, you usually try to learn as best you can all the facts and rules of law pertaining to that one case. When you're a supervisor, you're being bombarded with questions about 20 or 30 different cases all at once, and you need to try and learn the law as best you can. Be patient with all of these questions and concerns, and do your best to guide the young lawyers appropriately, as well as dealing with witnesses and police officers and judges who often get frustrated with the district attorney's office because they want to move cases along. And while they're often very cognizant of the defense attorney's schedules or witnesses' time when they may be on vacation or away, they usually feel the district attorney's office is so big, you can always have somebody step in and do the case. Well, that's not necessarily true. I mean, it takes a lot of work to prepare a case, bring it up to speed where it needs to be. You can't just suddenly substitute one assistant for another. It doesn't work that way. So you're dealing with a lot of factors all at once, whether they be your witnesses, the police officers, the judges, the defense attorneys and their schedule, um, as well as your own office's guidelines and pressures, that there's a lot to juggle all at once. And it's very stressful, not just for the other ADAs, it's stressful for you as well.
As we go towards the end of our interview today, I wanted to ask you, continuing on this idea of what young lawyers should keep in mind as they go about their careers. You gave an amazing advice of listen more, see what is needed of you. What are some other things that maybe as you were working with younger attorneys throughout your career, you maybe saw that somebody did that really impressed you and that was really helpful?
Well, one is to do your best you can to reassure the lawyers you're supervising, because as I said, many times they're very nervous, they're under a lot of stress, and they feel inadequate, that they don't know the law well enough to go into court and face somebody who may be more skilled than them, had more experience as an attorney. And one of the things I got to reemphasize is nobody's born with this knowledge. You learn it oftentimes gradually, and you've got to do your best to study hard, listen to what your witnesses are telling you, read up on the law, attend other colleagues' trials and pretrial hearings to get, a lot of suggestions how other people do it, and to do your best to relax. You obviously do a better job when you're relaxed than when you're under a lot of stress. And to know that it's a learning process. Don't be too hard on yourself, but don't lose confidence. Never quit, never give up. And if one trial doesn't go the way you would have liked it to have gone, move on to the next one, and hopefully you'll do better. It's my pleasure. And if I could help others, that would be my pleasure to do. And I might add that in addition to supervising ADAs, I also supervised a lot of law interns. And not only did I enjoy that, but I was trying to impart to the interns, whether it be tips or basic information that I thought would have been helpful had somebody imparted to me while I was in law school or thinking about a career. And I hope experienced lawyers will be very willing to help other students in law school or once they're out in the field to gain that knowledge and that experience, and know that nobody's born with this knowledge or experience, and it takes a while to develop and get good at it, and to be patient and do your best to help make the system work for everybody.
Thank you all for tuning into today's episode.